Imagine a dusty Texas dusk, where the air hums with cicadas and the glow of a firehouse lights up a sleepy town. That's where Evelyn Harper, Evie to anyone who mattered, lived her best days, a scrappy 10-year-old with a spark in her eye and a faded fire squad tee hanging off her skinny frame. Every Saturday she'd bolt to the station, her sneakers slapping the pavement, chasing the roar of sirens. Her dad, Ray Harper, was the king of that concrete castle, a lanky firefighter with a grin that could melt steel and a knack for turning emergencies into adventures. "Come on, rookie," he'd holler, tossing her a hose nozzle. "Let's save the day." But one sweltering evening, the hero didn't come home. Ray ran into a blazing barn to pull a kid out, and the roof caved in. A crack, a boom, and he was gone, swallowed by fire right before Evie's eyes. Those Saturdays had been sacred. Ray'd hoist Evie onto the fire truck, let her blast the horn till the old-timers griped, then spin her down the slide pole like she was born to fly. Diane, her mom, would shuffle in with a pitcher of tart lemonade, her apron smudged from frying burgers for the crew. The station smelled of oil and ash, but to Evie it was home, where Ray's laugh bounced off the walls and his calloused hands guided hers to tighten bolts. Even then, she knew she was different. Her heart fluttered for the girls on her softball team, not the boys. But Ray didn't care. "You're my blaze," he'd say, ruffling her hair. That night, though, the blaze took him. Evie stood frozen by the truck, Diane's screams shredding the air, as smoke stung her eyes and stole her world. Ray's death gutted the Harper house. Diane shut down. No more lemonade runs, no more smiles. The station locked its doors to Evie. The crew muttered it hurt too much to see Ray and her freckled face. She'd sneak out anyway, tracing the truck's faded stripes with her fingers, whispering to a ghost who'd never answer. Diane barely noticed, her eyes glassy, her voice a dull hum when she bothered to speak. Evie clung to Ray's old helmet, its dents a map of his courage, but the warmth of those Saturdays was ash now, scattered by a wind that wouldn't stop howling. Did this hit you hard? Tell us your favorite memory of a hero you lost. Drop it below, like, share, and sub to Heart Stories for more gut punch tales. The Texas sun didn't shine the same after Ray Harper burned out. Evelyn Evie Harper, barely 11, felt the shift like a weight on her chest. Those Saturday Firehouse romps were gone, replaced by a silence so thick it choked her. The old station loomed across town, a gray ghost she'd sneak to at dusk, tracing the truck's chipped paint with calloused fingertips. Her dad's helmet sat heavy in her lap, its scorch marks a silent promise she'd never let him fade. But home? That was another story. Diane Harper, once the heartbeat of their little trio, turned hollow. A shell who shuffled through days like a sleepwalker, barely glancing at Evie. The girl who'd once raced hoses with Ray was invisible now, a flicker snuffed out by grief too big to name. Evie tried to spark something, anything. She'd drag Ray's old toolbox into the kitchen, hammering nails into scrap wood, mimicking his steady rhythm. Once, she even hauled out the skillet, aiming to fry eggs like he used to on lazy Sundays. The yolk splattered, the pan smoked, and the fire alarm screeched till the windows rattled. Diane didn't laugh, didn't yell, just sighed. A long, tired gust, and muttered, "Can't you see I'm worn thin?" She shuffled off, leaving Evie with a charred mess and a sting that wasn't from the heat. The kid who'd once lit up her mom's world was a burden now, a shadow too loud to bear. Then Carl Dutton rolled in, a broad-shouldered lifer from Ray's crew, his boots thumping with quiet purpose. He'd known Ray since their rookie days, shared beers and close calls. And now he brought Diane a lifeline. She met him at some widow's circle, where his gravelly calm patched her cracks. Soon, he was fixing the sink, paying the gas bill, sleeping in Ray's old spot. Evie didn't hate him. He wasn't cruel, just stiff, offering her a nod or a "hey, kid" that landed flat. For a while, it worked. Diane's lips twitched upward when Carl cracked a rare grin, and the house felt less like a crypt. Evie dared to hope. Maybe this guy could thaw the ice, bring her mom back. But hope's a cruel tease. Diane got pregnant, and when Nate Dutton squalled into the world, everything tilted hard. He was a wiry runt, all lungs and demands, and Diane poured herself into him like he was her second chance. Carl softened too, toted Nate to the firehouse, carved him a tiny axe, called him Little Chief. Evie tagged along once, her heart thumping to see the old rigs again. But Carl's jaw tightened. Not today. Evie, this ain't your place no more, he said. Voice clipped. Diane nodded along. It's too hard. Honey reminds us of him. The station, her sanctuary, slammed shut. Nate got the keys. Evie got the cold shoulder. It got uglier fast. Nate grew loud and brash, a tornado in diapers, and Diane doted like he hung the moon. His toys, shiny fire trucks and plastic badges, cluttered the floor. Evie's sketches got shoved under the couch. She'd sweep up his chaos, only to catch hell if she missed a spot. Don't be sloppy, Diane snapped, cradling Nate. One day, at 14, Evie spilled her guts. She liked Riley. A freckled spitfire from school, not the boys chasing her. She scribbled it in her journal, dumb enough to leave it on the table. Diane found it, her face twisting like she'd swallowed ash. That's sick, she hissed, eyes blazing. We're fixing this. Next day, she dragged Evie to a church basement, some quack preacher promising to pray the sin away. Carl stood there, arms folded, saying nothing, his silence a blade sharper than Diane's words. Nate made it hell too. At 6, he'd swipe Ray's helmet, a sacred relic Evie guarded, and chuck it in the yard, giggling when it cracked. Oops, he'd smirk. And Diane'd swoop in. He's just playing, don't fuss. Once, he lit a match, torched the brim, and Diane cooed, boys will be boys. Evie lunged to save it, burning her palm, only for Carl to grunt. Quit stirring trouble. She was the trouble? The kid who'd lost her dad, her fire, her voice? By 15, Evie was a ghost in her own skin, scrubbing Nate's messes, dodging Diane's glares, burying her heart for Riley under layers of shame. Carl's eyes flicked her way sometimes, a glint of something, guilt. Maybe, but he never spoke up. The firehouse was Nate's kingdom now. And Evie? She was ash they'd swept aside. Evelyn Evie Harper was a fuse waiting to blow by 17, her spark buried under years of ash and neglect. The Texas sun baked her small town dry, but the real heat came from home. Diane's cold stares, Nate's smug rain, Carl's silent shrugs. Evie had grown tough, her hands rough from scrubbing Nate's messes, her heart tougher from hiding Riley's name in every sketch she scratched out in secret. The firehouse, her dad's legacy, was a locked vault now, Nate strutting its halls in a kitty helmet while she got the boot. The final straw hit one sticky August night. Nate, Tenenbaum bold, snatched Ray's cracked helmet from her shelf, doused it with lighter fluid, and struck a match. Oops. He grinned as flames licked the brim. Evie lunged, scorching her arm to save it, but Diane swooped in, cooing. He didn't mean it. Evie, don't make a scene. Carl grunted. You're too loud, kid, and turned away. Too loud? She'd been screaming inside for years, and they'd never heard a damn thing. That was it. Evie scraped her savings, pennies from odd jobs, and applied for a fire science scholarship in Colorado. When the acceptance letter came, she didn't tell a soul. Diane was too busy wiping Nate's nose. Carl, too, stuck in his own shadow. The night she left, she packed a duffel, Ray's singed helmet, a few shirts, her battered sketchbook, and walked out under a moonless sky. No goodbyes, no notes. The bus rumbled north, and for the first time, Evie breathed free air, sharp, cold, hers. Colorado was a new blaze. She aced her classes, learned to fight fire like Ray, and let Riley's memory fuel her instead of haunt her. She found girls who laughed at her grit, not her secrets, and built a life from embers they'd tried to douse, years torched by fast. Evie was 25, a rising star in fire tech, her name whispered in safety seminars across the Rockies. She'd carved a world where Ray's ghost cheered her on, not weighed her down. Then Carl died, lungs shredded by decades of smoke. A quiet rot he'd hid till the end. A lawyer's call broke her stride. He left you something. A thick envelope hit her mailbox days later. Inside, a cashier's check, hefty from his firefighter's insurance, and a letter in shaky scrawl. Evie's gut twisted as she read, "Evie, I love Jack, Ray's partner. My shadow. Hid it all my life. Scared stiff. Watched Diane break you. Same as me. And I froze. Forgive me, I owed you more." Her hands shook. Carl, stoic, spineless Carl, gay. He'd known her fight, mirrored it, and still let her burn alone. The check felt like blood money, a coward's last plea. She was still reeling when Diane's call crackled through, a voice she hadn't heard in 8 years, thin and frantic. "Evie, it's Nate, he's in deep. Set a fire at school? Owes thousands, help us." Evie barked a laugh, bitter as soot. "Help you? After you picked him over me?" Diane's sob was rehearsed. "We're family, please." Evie's voice went steel cold. "You want cash? Tell the world Carl was right. Nate's a liar. Pyro, own it. Or choke on it." Diane gasped. "That's cruel," and hung up. Hours later, Nate's text slithered in. "I'll torch your fancy life. Just watch me." Evie's pulse spiked. Nate, now 16, wasn't bluffing. She screenshot it, jaw tight. But Diane doubled down days later, suing for Carl's money, claiming family rights. The gall of it after they'd erased her lit a fire she couldn't douse. Evie didn't bend. She hired a lawyer, a bulldog named Reese who sniffed out Diane's bluff. The lawsuit crumbled. Nate's threats and Diane's neglect painted them rotten in court. Evie won, keeping every cent, but Nate's words gnawed at her. He'd always been a matchstick waiting to flare, and she'd been the kindling they'd tossed aside. Carl's letter burned brightest now, a confession from a man who'd lived her pain but left her to fight it solo. She stared at the check. Its zero's a taunt. Diane wanted it for Nate's mess. Nate wanted her ruin. But Evie, she wanted something bigger, something Ray would have roared for, something Carl never dared. The Ember was hers to wield now, and she'd make it blaze. Evelyn Evie Harper stood at the edge of her Colorado apartment. Carl's letter crumpled in one hand. The check, a fat stack of guilt money taunting her from the table. 25 and forged in fire. She'd clawed free of Diane's neglect and Nate's venom, but their shadows slunk back. Greedy as ever, Diane's lawsuit had landed like a brick through her window, claiming Carl's cash as family dues, after years of treating Evie like soot under their boots. Nate's threat to burn her life down wasn't idle chatter either. The kid had a matchstick soul, and Evie knew it. She could have folded, sent the money, let them choke on it, but that wasn't Ray Harper's kid. She lit up instead, and this blaze wasn't for them. Reese, her lawyer, was a pit bull with a nose for rot. He dug into Diane's claim, unearthing Nate's rap sheet, arson at school, petty theft, a trail of wreckage Diane swept under her martyr's rug. Evie handed over Carl's letter too, that shaky confession of love and cowardice, and Nate's text threatening her life. "They're cooked," Reese growled, filing a countersuit that turned the tables fast. In court, Diane played the weepy widow, clutching Nate like he was still her golden boy. But the judge wasn't buying the act. Evidence piled high, Carl's words, Nate's crimes, years of Diane's blind favoritism, and the gavel slammed down. Diane lost everything. The house went to creditors. Nate got probation with a fat fine, and Evie kept every dime. The victory tasted sharp, like smoke off a fresh blaze. But it wasn't enough. Nate didn't stop. Days after the ruling, word hit Evie through an old town grapevine. Her little brother torched a shed behind the firehouse, grinning as it flared, a middle finger to her win. Cops nabbed him mid-cackle, and the judge slapped him with jail time this round. Diane wailed to anyone who'd listen, painting Evie the villain, but the town had read Carl's truth by then. She'd leaked it, not out of spite, but justice, posting the letter online with a clipped note. "This is who they buried." The post spread like wildfire. Old firefighters nodding grimly, neighbors whispering shame. Diane's pleas dried up. Nate's cell locked tight. Evie didn't gloat, she just turned away. The ash of their ruin settling cold. That check, though it burned a hole in her pocket. Diane wanted it for Nate's debts. Nate wanted her broken. Evie saw a different flame. Ray taught her fire could save, not just destroy, and Carl's regret begged for redemption she'd never give him alive. So she built Harper's Ember, not some brick-and-mortar shrine, but a sleek app, free for the taking, wired with AI to sniff out smoke before it roared. It pinged alerts to phones in trailer parks and row houses, places too poor for fancy systems, pairing them with lessons on fighting flames and living loud as yourself. She wove in a lifeline, too, chat threads for kids like her, queer and cast off, linking them to mentors who'd survived the same hell. It wasn't charity, it was a torch, passed from Ray's hands to hers. Lit by Carl's late shame, the app took off, downloads spiked in weeks. Stories pouring in from folks who'd caught sparks early, kids who found a voice. Evie's name buzzed again, not just in fire tech, but in quiet corners where outcasts huddled. She didn't send Diane a dime, but she mailed one last letter, penned in a fury that cooled to steel. I'm not your daughter anymore, I'm Ray's fire, not your pawn. I've built what you broke. Diane got it days later, her fingers trembling as she read, Nate's cell-block silence ringing louder than her tears. The town watched her shrink, a woman who'd banked on the wrong kid, while Evie burned brighter than ever. Harper's Ember wasn't just a win, it was a reckoning. Evie stood taller, her scars a map of fights won, her app a shield for those still in the dark. Diane and Nate could rot in their ashes. She'd forged a family from strangers who saw her, really saw her. Carl's money had sparked it, but Evie's grit fueled the flame, and that was a blaze they'd never snuff out. Evelyn Evie Harper stood under a Colorado sky, the wind sharp with pine and promise. At 26, she'd turned Carl's blood money into Harper's Ember, an app lighting up lives, saving homes, lifting kids like her from the ashes of rejection. Her name rang out now, not just in tech circles but in whispers of gratitude from folks who'd dodged flames and found courage. Diane and Nate? They'd faded to cinders, her mom a hollow shell in a rented trailer, her brother a jailbird with no matches left to strike. Evie didn't look back. She'd built a family from strangers who saw her fire, not her scars. Ray's spirit roared in every alert she sent, a legacy no one could douse. Then came the twist. A grizzled firefighter, Tompkins, tracked her down at a seminar. Ray didn't die for a kid. He rasped, eyes wet. He hauled Carl out of that barn. Roof fell anyway. Carl swore he'd guard you. Evie froze. The truth a sucker punch. Her dad saved Carl, not some stranger, and Carl repaid it with silence, letting Diane snuff her out. The irony stung. Ray's last act lit Carl's confession, and Evie's blaze. Later, word slipped through. Nate tried torching the old firehouse for revenge, caught mid-flame by her app's alert. Cops nabbed him, a poetic scorch mark on his downfall. Evie smiled, bitter but free. You can't kill fire, she mused, watching smoke curl in her mind. Diane got regret. Evie got redemption. Would forgiveness ever flicker her way? Would you forgive a coward who cost you everything, or let them burn in their regrets? Tell us below, like, share, sub to Heart Stories for more.